I mean, what's the proper word? Scathing?
See, I was going to say scathing.
It was not a good look for the Giants and what's gone on with Brian Daboll. And I talked to Pat last night. We had him on for the WFAN Daily podcast that we do. But, reading the story and going based off of some of the quotes, not a good look for Daboll. However, for me, I'm with Daboll. And I'm not saying and Pat's a good reporter, so I trust that this is factual. He's not making stuff up, okay? This is factual. This has gone on. Now it's a matter of how you accept the reality of what Brian Daboll is as a head coach. Could he be a little ornery? Could he be a little rough around the edges? A little tense on game days? Maybe, and seems to be the case. You know what? I'm fine with it because I believe he can win. He did win in year one. If he was losing in the locker room the way that other coaches around the league, Nick Sirianni, have done, I'd be concerned. I'm with Dabes here, BT. I don't care if he yells at somebody. If you can't take the heat, get your ass out the kitchen. This is Brian Daboll's team, and I'm with Dabes.
I like Daboll, and I'm with Daboll as well, but I think there's more to it here because they need to determine if he's intense and demanding or erratic and reckless. And I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is there's a lot of smoke here. I mean...
But it's game day stuff, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, think about this, Sal. When you hire somebody, right?
Right.
And you put them in a position of power, not ultimate power, because that's ownership, and that's obviously Joe Shane is the GM, but he's got jurisdiction, if you're a football jurisdiction, over a lot of people. The best people hire people and empower them to do the job that you hired them to do. If Daboll is yelling like an incensed, unhinged lunatic on game day, interfering with Wink or whomever's the next DC or Kafka, that with their job, that is destructive, and that is a show that. That's a shelf life that's going to expire fast.
Now, why didn't this stuff come out last year? Because Daboll didn't change, right? He was doing the same stuff a year ago. So why didn't it come out then?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think there's a honeymoon stage. Think about this. Like when you start working with somebody, maybe the things that...
Like us right now?
Yeah. We're still in the honeymoon stage, buddy.
Next year, wait till the ugliness comes out.
Gloves are off,
After the Mets-Yankees season, I've had enough of the Mets getting beat. You're taking victory laps.
Now pitching Andre Scrub. No, I mean, when you're around somebody and it's the early stages of a relationship... You generally, you tend to illuminate what's good, generally, and maybe take what's bad and look at it as something that can be fixed or can change, or maybe you're misreading the situation, and maybe you just don't give it the energy or the life that it deserves. Now, that's the first year. And if there's success, it's even more so. It's that stuff is minimized even more. When you get deeper into a relationship and those same things are still there, and you're losing now it's amplified, and now people start talking.
Right, I think the losing is a big issue here. For me, the way I'm going to interpret this, because Daboll is not changing, it's not like all of a sudden, and for the record, the thing that is more important to me, okay, it's on game day, getting on coaches. Hey, this is football here. Like, you don't work at a library. Like, this is football. And if he were walking around the building, MFing people left and right, or being disrespectful or ornery toward workers at the facility, toward just Giants employees in general, that'd be a different story. That is not the case here. We're talking about game day, getting on the coaches in the heat of battle and in a moment. So I have no issue with what Brian Daboll is doing as a head coach on game day. Now, I'm interpreting it as he sniffed out that they had a problem, right? He went, and Paul Schwartz had it in his report last week in the Post. He went to the coaches, called them in, and said, anybody, after the Jay Glazer report, anybody got a problem here?
Yep, nobody stepped up.
Yeah, and of course, all the cowards, and I'm talking about you, Wink Martindale and the Wilkins brothers, all the cowards when Daboll, as a man, brought them in the room and said, anybody here got a problem with me? You guys got a problem? Because somebody's leaking it to Glazer. I know it wasn't me. Somebody's talking here. If you've got a problem, open your mouth now to me. And what'd they do? Nothing. The cowards said nothing. So now if I'm Daboll, I know that I'm working with some cowards who are rats going out there leaking stuff. I need to figure out who it is. That's exactly what he did. He thought he identified the problem. He made some changes. And since then, all this stuff has come out. So you tell me if this is a Daboll problem or Daboll's fixing the problem. I tend to think the latter. Daboll is fixing what was a problem on that Giants coaching staff.
Well, yes, unless it's a personality trait that's going to eventually seep into the next relationship. And that's, I'm certainly with you on this. When I can't stand passive-aggressive people.
Right.
I cannot stand it. It's never worked for me. I'm not here to just tell me.
Right.
If I messed up, man up, and I will do the same, and let's have a conversation, and let's flush this out. So I'm with you on that. I appreciate Daboll doing that. But that doesn't minimize what could be a very destructive trait. Now, think about this. You sabotage game day stuff. So you can still be upfront and be a man, if you will, about things, but you can almost offset that if the behavior is toxic. Now, rats and those kind of people in the buildings, you've got to get rid of them. But this seems almost, and I'm not in the building, so I've got to straddle this line properly and fairly to Daboll and everybody involved. This seems like a guy, Daboll, who I believe is a great asset. I really, really think he's going to be a superstar if he doesn't destroy himself. I mean, when you can't shut up on game day to the point where whether you like Wink, you don't like Wink, you trust Wink, you don't trust Wink, where you interfere to the point where there is chaos, that does not portend good things for the future.
He's got to learn, if that is the case, the specifics of it, and that's what Pat reported. Some of it was to a point where they were having a problem getting the right plays in, because he was chastising coaches on a headset. Daboll's got to learn from that and realize when to let off the gas a little bit. And I will say the one, not even damning thing, we're going to find out because the Giants need coaches, right? Like you need to follow your coaching staff. We're going to find out who's willing to come here and then how it goes from now on, because the one thing was that a source in the building said, I wouldn't come here. Or don't come
somebody
here.
reached out about the job.
Somebody reached out to a source in the building about one of the openings and said, don't come here. But that's fine. Not everybody can handle working with Bill Belichick or playing for Bill Belichick. Maybe not everybody can handle working with Brian Daboll or playing for Brian Daboll.
Yeah.
You got to find the right guys. And this, to me, is at least a consistent pattern. Daboll is not pretending to be somebody else. He could be rough around the edges with the media. He could be rough with his players. We've seen him show frustration on the sideline with Daniel Jones and others.
Tyrod Taylor as well.
It's one of the things that I like about Daboll, that he's not afraid to get him. He's a hothead, an admitted hothead. Those are things that can be great assets for a head coach if you don't let it become a major weakness. Like, your greatest strength cannot become also your greatest weakness. You've got to be able to harness it and use it the right way.
No, and that comes with maturity, and that comes with confidence, and that comes with an understanding of your place in the workforce. Like, this is a little confusing because I generally love people like Daboll.
Right.
I do, and I support him, to be clear, but I'd be a little worried about this. And I want to go back to something that you said before about, it's just on game day and it hasn't really permeated the rest of the building. I would challenge and I would say I think it's impossible for it not to filter into the building. And I'll give you an example of our workplace.
Right.
Now, Spike is demanding, but Spike lets us do our job.
Right.
We have our meetings, and sometimes it's like, we got to really grind to get to where we want to go, and he's not going to accept anything less than we are ready to roll. And sometimes it's hard because it's not always in front of you for the main topic of the show, and it's a process that takes time. But it's a great process and it's a necessary one. But when we get on the air, he's not up our ass.
Right.
Can you imagine us doing our show and Spike coming in? And I've worked for people who do this.
Right.
We've been in this business a long time. The door keeps popping open. What are you guys doing? This isn't what we talked about in the meeting.
Right.
Come on, guys, get your act together. How can you function mentally when you work with somebody like that? So my
funny you say that. I think certain people
my pushback would be that you can't. So while, and again, in our ridiculous example, Spike coming in here, which he almost never does, and getting, quote unquote, in our way during the show, getting in our minds, I think that bleeds into the office stuff when we're not on the air. Because it creates a negative energy so strong when you're doing your job that you can't separate the two.
I do, though, think, and I like the example, and me, myself, like, I've never been, even if you go back to Little League, whatever it may be, I've never been somebody who responds well to the hard type of coaching, that tough atmosphere. Now, maybe a part of me, like, I do it harder behind the scenes and work harder and try for perfection and make everybody happy, but I don't love that feeling, that uneasy, uncomfortable feeling at times. I like it to be a little loose and trust me to do my thing. However, We're talking about a football team here.
Yeah.
This is football. Like, there is nothing soft about the NFL, although the new rules, it's two-hand touch, and we can get more into that later on. But, like, you can't beat around. This is the NFL here. You either got it or you don't. You either make the plays or you don't. Because if Daboll's staff doesn't do the right thing, doesn't call the right plays, is not on top of their players to do the right thing, guess who's getting fired? He is, ultimately. Now, like you said, you don't want to create a negative working environment, but it is the NFL.
But it's also got to be authentic, and it's got to be on the. Well, yes, it's the NFL, but it's not the 1970s NFL.
Well,
so you've got to, treat people a little differently. We know that. But whether it's too soft, and you and I both believe fundamentally that the world's become too soft, you still have to adjust to that different space. I think we want to get these calls. Yeah. My biggest issue, though, don't pass the buck. Like, if your offense is going out there and hanging 35, 40 points on teams, and your defense is getting gashed and you want to overreact, that's different. But when your offense is doing nothing, as it did for major swaths of this season, and you're lighting up your defense, that's not consistent.
Yeah, 877-337-6666. By the way, you want a nice guy? Hire Robert Saleh. Our friends at Town Fair Tire remind you that at Town Fair Tire, you always get the guaranteed lowest price on name brand tires. From Connecticut to Maine, nobody beats Town Fair Tire. Nobody. Andrew is calling from Shirley. What's up, Andrew?
Hey, guys, thanks for having me on. It's been a while. I've been able to get on with you guys.
How are you, Andrew?
What's happening, buddy?
Doing good. I want to make a point about the whole Daboll Giants thing because it has parallels to the Mets, and I really feel like we're falling into the same trap here in New York media. I'm not validating or invalidating what reports of what's actually going on. I'm talking about what we're making a big deal about versus wasn't previously. I think it's simply a fact of when you're winning, all of a sudden nothing's a problem, and when you're losing, everything's a problem. You look at 2022 Mets, you didn't hear a peep about that locker room. I mean, maybe in the final month when things start falling apart, I don't actually remember that.
Right.
But in 2022, you didn't hear a peep about how Pete Alonso and Lindor and Buck and Epler and everybody hates each other and it's the worst locker room. But in 2023, it was the worst place to ever swing a bat. In the Giants, I watched Daboll scream in my quarterback's face, and it actually worked out for the better. So I know he was that guy from the beginning. And all of a sudden now this year, this toxic and chaos and destroying everything. Well, let's look at the scoreboard. Wow, they're losing a lot. And this is where all the reports are coming from. And not for nothing, the success thing, I'm pretty sure the first 6 games of not having, a single sack on any team at all whatsoever started to creep in. And the problem is Daboll can jump in and take the controls of the offense like he did from Kafka, whether he wants to admit it or not. He can't jump in and take the reins from Wink. So all he could do is really yell and scream and say, hey, can you, I just need you to do your job better.
Right.
And it may have rubbed him the wrong way. It's fine. But listen, this is a winning/losing thing in the New York media. It's natural. I'm okay with the way Daboll is. Next year, they rattle off 4 wins, 3 wins early, whatever it is. All of a sudden, we're going to say it's the best coaching style ever.
The most important thing, Andrew, and thank you for the call, the most important thing is if he loses the players. Mm-hmm. And for the record, like, I'm torn on – I believe in what I believe in with Brian Daboll and how a coach should be. And I do think you've got to be tough and show tough love and demand respect and hold guys accountable. However, we saw with Tom Coughlin. Nobody was a bigger hard ass than Tom Coughlin, but he evolved. Yeah. And until he evolved, he wasn't having success in New York. Once he evolved and let off the gas a little bit, like Daboll might be at 120. Let off the gas a little bit. Get yourself to 100 or 95. Yeah. And it will be even more effective. But I believe in his mentality and holding guys, whether it's coaches, whether it's players, accountable. And there's something to it, BT, that is shown to be successful. Year 1, he was the same way. They went to the playoffs, got the most out of Daniel Jones, won a playoff game. Year 2, he was the same way, even with all the frustrations, even with the adversity, when things could have gone off the rails and they could have been 2-15 or 3-14. And by the way, if they did finish that, maybe we'd be talking about him getting fired now. But they didn't. He righted the ship. They won a few games in a row, beating some good teams. They were competitive down the stretch.
Yep.
So that shows me that the players respond to what he's doing. It's working.
That's a good point. That's the ultimate barometer, which is why I'm behind Brian Daboll. I guess I'm preemptively trying to, get to, I don't want to say give him advice. I mean, who the hell am I to give anybody advice other than myself? But, hopefully he understands that, I might have to self-examine a little bit here, look in the mirror and augment a few things. But the one thing about Daboll, and we've known this, Brian Daboll's been this guy since game 1, year 1 at Tennessee, when he got in Daniel Jones's ass.
Right.
So this is not like he's this radical flip of personality. They know who they hired, and if they didn't, then they're fools.
Correct.
I think that they hired the right person, and the evidence backed that up in year 1. Took a step back in year 2. A lot of coaches do. It's part of the process. Now year 3, though, here's the difference. With all this other stuff now year 3, any stumble early becomes amplified.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. Because of all this stuff, oh, baby, the bullseye is going to be right on Daboll now immediately to succeed this year. Steve is in Newark. What's up, Steve?
Steve-O?
Hey, guys, 2 points. Quick. This is, first of all, Big Baby went crying on his way out. He got the boot from Baltimore, right, for a reason. It's told him so much you can put up with. After this year, enough already. I mean, this is the only reason it's coming out. Bad season, understandable. Second point, I would take Daboll in a heartbeat over that comatose stature with the Jets.
Yeah, me too.
Well, that's the other side of this.
Me too.
Right? I mean, that's the other side, Steve, and thank you for the call. Like, you don't like Daboll, and he's too rough around the edges, and he's got to lighten up, and go hire a guy like Robert Saleh, who we sit here and say, can you do something? The team is falling apart. You stand there with your hands crossed on the sideline, running stairs, for God's sake. I mean, eat a pizza and yell at somebody like Daboll would.
Yeah. It's funny how this works, though. You know, if the Jets were winning, we'd be saying, Saleh's composure is paramount to their success. Like we said in Daboll's first year, his personality has been helped propel the Giants, where now this year suddenly it's an issue. Listen, the answer is probably somewhere in between.
Right.
But again, the optics matter, and a quick start is now paramount. It's going to change immediately if the Giants don't start well.
Look, there's no...
Whether that's fair or unfair.
No, well, that's going to be the case. That is going to be the case. But as far as which head coach could have more success, you're right. It doesn't have to be all one way or all the other way. And there is not just one way to do it. We've seen coaches that are players' coaches have success. Pete Carroll is a guy who is loving his players and jubilant and all those different things. He's not. You don't see him yelling at guys the way that we see with Brian Daboll, or the way that Bill Parcells used to do it, or Belichick, where he won't even draft you if he doesn't think that you're too, or you're interested or potentially a problem, which, by the way, turned out to be a problem for him. So we've seen a balance of different type of coaches having success, especially the way the sport has evolved. I think Saleh's the one end of the spectrum, which I would not want, and Daboll's leaning toward the other side of the spectrum,
which could be equally dangerous.
Correct.
Yep.
If he doesn't. Just be. I want him to be himself, and I still want him to be a hard ass and a tough ass and command the most of his coaches and players. But you got to be careful, because now he's. Like what these report, he's going to be on the brink. I don't want him to change, though, BT. I don't want it to be like, oh, God, I got $1 back.
No, if that guy shows up, then he's dead. I mean, let's face it, that guy will be dead quicker than a guy who doesn't change at all, and he's just a hothead and explodes. Right. No, when you change too much and you get away from what got you wherever you get, you're asking for trouble. Listen, I don't care about berate. Not that I haven't reacted to it. I've had observations. But at the end of the day, I don't put too much emphasis on berating players, though it is a different climate. You've got to be, it can't be all the time.
Berating is different than, hey, we went over this a million times. Why are you throwing this ball in the spot? Whatever it may be.
Coaching aggressively.
Exactly.
I'm doing my job. I'm coaching.
Coaching them hard.
I don't care too much about the podium stuff. You want to be a red ass. You want to ignore stuff. You don't want to crack jokes. That's fine. What worries me, this is all I care about with Daboll. One of the greatest traits of any person of authority is delegating responsibility and allowing the people that you hire and empower to do their job. And at least from this report, okay, and I'm not about to refute it because I don't know.
Right.
I'm open-minded, eyes wide open. If you are sabotaging people that you put in power to do their job, ultimately you're dead.